Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Bride and the Cafe Owner. Chapter 1. Y'all all right over here? Daisy Johnson asked as she swept toward table number 3 with a fresh teapot in hand. Sure are, John Winston replied, with his customary wide, toothy grin. His wife, Phyllis, sat beside him, tight-lipped. Would you care for anything? Daisy asked the woman. I would have said so if I did, she snapped, giving Daisy a curt look. I can speak for myself. Daisy bristled but did her best to keep a smile on her face as she poured Mr. Winston another cup of tea. After all, he and his wife were both customers and waiting on them was her job, even if it meant dealing with an unpleasant attitude. Phyllis Winston was one of Daisy's least favorite customers. Phyllis wasn't the wealthiest woman in town, but was definitely amongst the richest, and because of that, she lorded it over everyone, especially Daisy. Being a serving girl for the Lawton City Cafe made Daisy the equivalent to a servant in the eyes of Phyllis and her socialite friends, but the fact that Daisy also worked as a saloon girl across the way made her a complete undesirable. Daisy tried to mentally dismiss the woman, figuring she didn't need those kinds of friends. She preferred the people she associated with to be kind and generous. Ah, Phyllis, must you be like that? John protested, coming to Daisy's defense. Daisy here is a nice young gal. Daisy often wondered how John wound up with a wife like Phyllis. They seemed polar opposites. John was sweet and friendly. Daisy never saw him cause even the tiniest of trouble, and he always had a smile to offer her. In truth, the man reminded Daisy of the father she'd lost long ago. A nice girl? Ha! She works at the saloon, you know, Phyllis condescended, taking her teacup and sticking out her pinky as she sipped. Better watch that pinky, Daisy thought sarcastically, looking at the cantankerous biddy. It's hangin' outright funny there. Never know what may happen to it. Could get knocked sideways, by accident, of course. She gave John a pleasant smile. I'll clear your plate. Daisy gritted her teeth with every step she took toward the kitchen. If it weren't for the fact that the Winstons were one of the few regular customers the cafe had lately, and if it weren't for the fact that John and his wife spent every morning occupying the window table of the cafe, Daisy might have been tempted to tell Phyllis precisely where her finger may have gotten knocked sideways, right up her nose. Don't let that old goat get to ya, Robert commented as Daisy passed him. Her boss knew her well. After 4 years working side by side, they'd learned to read each other better than most. She's an insufferable old bat, Daisy whispered through clenched teeth as she sidestepped Robert and disappeared behind the swinging doors into the kitchen. Can't argue with ya, but have you seen business out there? Robert followed her into the kitchen. Course I have, she replied, giving Robert a knowing look. It's been like that for weeks now. Hardly anyone comin' in these days. I can't figure why. His head shook as he spoke, and Daisy noticed the worried look in his eyes. She was concerned, too. Things had been slipping for a while, months really, but it sounded better if she called it weeks. It gave her less cause to worry, though the feeling was always there. She put the plates in the sink for Jasper, the dishwasher boy, to wash up, and curled a lock of her fiery hair around a finger, and then tucked it behind her ear out of the way. When she turned around, she found Robert peering over the top of the swinging doors into the restaurant. She'd never seen him so worried. Business will pick up, she assured him, stepping forward and laying a hand on his arm. Hope you're right, Daisy. In all my years of running this place, business has never been so low. Things'll work out. Maybe you could look at doing something to attract customers back. Don't you think I've been doing that? I can't think of nothin'. I don't know what else to do. She hated seeing him like this. Robert had helped her so much when she first arrived in Lawton City. She'd done her best to repay him, but there was never much she could do, he always seemed to have things in hand. He always had a plan. This was the first time he didn't, and it was concerning. She wondered if it was a good time to talk to him about her own ideas for the cafe. Daisy had been thinking about the flagging business of the cafe for quite some time. She'd muddled over ideas for special events, and themed parties, and maybe even renting out the cafe for special occasions. They seemed good ideas to her, ones that would bring people to the place and keep the doors open. The problem was she couldn't bring herself to share them. Robert was so particular about the way his businesses were run. He hovered between the inn and the cafe every day to make sure things were just the way he wanted them. Her ideas wouldn't be what he was used to, and despite being a good business owner, Robert had always believed in letting things work themselves out. Yet maybe if she tried to share her ideas with him, he would accept them. She opened her mouth to speak, but Robert silenced her before she could utter a word. "Looks like Marshall and Grace are here," he commented, his voice taking on a more cheerful tone. "Really?" Daisy replied, sharing his enthusiasm. "I was hoping they'd come in today." She gave him a grin and pushed through the doors and rushed out to see her friends. "Daisy," Grace exclaimed as she pulled her into a warm hug. "It's good to see you, Gracie," Daisy replied, holding her friend close. "How are you two doing?" she asked, putting a hand to Grace's belly. "Much better now." "The first 3 months were the hardest," Grace replied with a grin. "And how's the daddy-to-be?" Daisy asked, turning her gaze to Marshall, who leaned in and gave her a friendly kiss on the cheek before turning his attention to Robert, who had followed Daisy out and was standing behind her. "How are things these days, Robert?" Marshall questioned, looking around. "It's what you see," Robert replied. Marshall was good to hide his concern, but when his gaze met Daisy's, she saw the questions in his eyes. He didn't like the look of things any more than she did. "If you aren't too busy, Daisy, do you have some time to talk?" Grace asked. "For you, I always have time." "I'll watch the tables," Robert commented. "You want anything, Marshall?" "A cup of coffee would be good," Marshall replied, as the ladies walked off to find a table. They found their favorite one near the back of the cafe and took a seat. "How are things going here?" "I mean in truth," Grace asked, almost immediately. "We're doing all right. Things could be better, but we're making do for now. How about you? I heard Marshall hired a girl to help you on the ranch." "Yes. After I was so ill, he thought it best for me to take it as easy as possible until the baby comes." Grace's first months had been difficult to watch. She suffered from such violent morning sickness that the local doc had recommended she stay in bed. Daisy had done her best to visit, but getting out to the ranch had proven more difficult with the current circumstances at the cafe and inn. "I'm real sorry I couldn't visit you more often, but Robert needed me here." The cook quit and moved over to First Pike, and Robert needed someone to take over and watch the front. "I was running around a lot, and then I'd go straight over to the saloon when we closed up here. Not that I was on my own with it all. Robert helped as much as he could. That had to be difficult." "And the cook quit? How'd you manage it?" "I did the cooking and Robert took care of the customers, what few there were. He was really pinched between here and the inn." Grace was like Daisy's big sister. They'd shared so much, including the truth of Daisy's past, something she hadn't ever shared with Robert. But there were still some things Daisy had never said. "Gracie, if I told ya I think I have a way to save the cafe, would you think me stupid for wanting to share it?" "Of course not." "Why would you think that?" "It's just Robert's real traditional, 'bout women and workin' and all, and I'm not sure if he'd listen me." "Daisy, Robert's a smart man, and he trusts you. Of course, he'd listen. Sometimes, you need to take a chance. I have big dreams for this place, and for my life. I want what you have, Gracie. A husband and baby on the way, but also a little business of my own. I've been saving for ages for it. Then you should share your ideas. What could it hurt? Talk to Robert. You never know what may happen when you do," Grace replied, and gave Daisy an encouraging smile. Daisy bit her lip. Maybe her friend was right. Robert is a good man, she said, beginning to feel bolder. Maybe he'd listen to me. And as for a husband and family, well, maybe I'll get as lucky as you and my Mr. Right will walk through those doors. There are other places he may be, Grace suggested. What do you mean? Have you looked in the newspaper lately? Grace asked with a grin. Daisy knew immediately what her friend meant. A mail-order bride? Me? She guffawed. Just because it worked for you, don't mean it'll work for me. I wouldn't know what to say to make a man interested in me. All you need to do is be yourself. There's plenty interesting about you. I don't know, Gracie. Maybe you should look into it. It did work real good for me. It did, didn't it? The thought had some appeal, but Daisy wasn't sure about it. Could she really become a mail-order bride? Chapter 2. With the slower business, the days were so long that Daisy found herself trying to find things to do on an hourly basis. She'd never been so bored in all her life, which may have explained why she was combing through the newspaper once again. Usually the paper held no interest for her. She wasn't one who cared about what was going on in the country, only her small corner of Lawton City. Things were a little different now. Ever since her talk with Grace, Daisy had begun to wonder. What if the right man for her was out there looking for her in some other remote town? What if he'd been putting adverts in the paper hoping the right woman would reply? What if the right woman was her, and she'd kept on stubbornly refusing to look? After a week or two of her internal questioning, she finally began to skim the pages of the paper, for her own amusement of course, nothing more. At least, that was what she told herself. Don't you have something to do? Robert's voice met her ear, as he walked into the office where she was sitting. Just readin', she replied weakly, turning her shoulder so he wouldn't see what she was looking at. Anything interesting? He asked. Nothin' much. Phyllis Winston is having a birthday, she commented. How do you know that? She put an advert in the paper, she mused, flipping the page. Robert laughed. Some people are just so full of themselves, thinking everyone should care what they're celebrating. Daisy continued to look through the mail-order bride advertisements until one caught her eye. There was no name or direct mailing address. Everything was being handled by an agency it seemed, but there was something about the way the advert was worded that piqued her curiosity. The man was looking for an adventurous woman, one who was ready to brave the Wild West and start a new chapter in her life. It sounded just like her. You lookin' at mail-order brides? Robert's surprised voice echoed in her ear. She hadn't even noticed when he'd approached her, and he was now hovering over her shoulder looking at the page beneath her palm. Course not. What would I be doing lookin' at those? She countered with a nervous laugh. He laughed as well. That's what I thought. You ain't lookin' to marry. Ye're still a girl. I'm 20 years old, Robert. I ain't no girl. You know what I mean, he said, avoiding her gaze. I don't think I do. Now, come on Daisy, I was just teasing. It was too late, Daisy was already on her feet, her hands fisted on her hips. You better explain yourself, Robert Emanuel Ferguson. What's that supposed to mean? Oh boy, I'm in for it now. Ye're Callan, me by my whole name, Robert replied, sounding amused. I'm not laughing. What are you trying to say? Daisy, he said with a grin, I've known you since you was 16. Ye're always gonna be a girl in my eyes. He reached over and ruffled her hair. She promptly smacked his hand away. You may see me as a girl, Robert, but I assure you, there are men in the world who would see me for what I am, a woman, she replied indignantly. Of course there are, Daisy. I'm just sayin', I don't see you like that, he replied, somewhat dismissively. Now, I better get back to the inn. I can see you don't need me over here. No, we don't, Daisy replied. So get yourself right on outta here. She threw a wad of paper at the back of his head. She had good aim, and it smacked him lightly right behind his ear. I'm goin'. You stop reading that stuff now and get back to work, Robert said with a small scowl as he rubbed the back of his head. Daisy folded her arms across her chest in satisfaction. It served him right for trying to say she wasn't a woman. And I do not need you telling me what to do. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own time, thank you. Robert laughed. Yes, Miss Johnson. The door closed behind him. Daisy watched as Robert left, her temper still flaring at the insinuation that she wasn't a woman yet. She had a job, worked hard, and had filled out in all the right places. She didn't look like a girl anymore, and she certainly didn't think like one. Daisy had plans, big plans, and she wasn't just sitting back and waiting for someone to make them happen. She was going to make them happen. That was why she'd left her small town and moved to Lawton City in the first place. She wanted to make her own way, and she was doing it. It didn't matter that Robert couldn't see it, the truth was indisputable. She sat determinedly at the table and found a pen and paper on the desk. She began to write immediately. Dear Sir, I love adventure. My entire life has been one adventure after another, and I'm ready for one more. I'm a young woman, strong and hardworking. I've been taking care of myself for years, and I'm used to caring for others. I work with lots of people all the time, and I'm good at making conversation, or so I'm told. If you're interested in corresponding with me, it would be my sincere pleasure to write to ya. I look forward to hearing from ya. Regards. A Lady. Chapter 3. Good mornin', Mrs. Winston. Don't you look lovely today? Such a pretty dress. I brought out our best china for our best customer, and the tea's nice and fresh. Will you be havin' your usual today? Daisy asked with a grin, leaving Phyllis Winston speechless. The usual will be just fine, Daisy, her husband interjected. Daisy couldn't be sure, but he seemed to be suppressing a chuckle. Very well, Mr. Winston. I'll be right back with your order. Enjoy your tea while you wait. Daisy felt as if she was floating across the floor as she walked into the kitchen. Marjorie, I need 2 orders of bacon, fried eggs, blueberry muffins, white toast and potatoes. Comin' right up, Daisy dear. You feelin' all right? The wiry cook asked as she looked up from her bowl of batter. Course, I am. Why d'ya ask? Daisy replied, baffled. Nothin'. You just seem different is all. I don't know what you mean. I'm feelin' normal, she said before leaving the kitchen. There was a reason for her joy, but she wasn't about to tell the nosiest cook in the whole town. Daisy liked to keep her personal life private. She didn't care for being the subject of gossip. She remembered very keenly what had happened when Grace had come to town and others had learned how she and Marshall had met. Things had died down now they were married and settled, but it had been all the talk for months when the town had first learned of their plans. Mail order bride, indeed. She didn't like all that gossip for Grace, and she certainly didn't want it for herself. Best to keep the topic private. It was no one's business but hers anyway. She stepped onto the cafe floor and was greeted by a wonderful sight, for there seated at the very table they'd occupied on her last visit, was Grace. Gracie, I didn't realize you were comin' to town today. Where's Marshall? He had a few errands to run, and I told him I'd be just fine waiting here until he was done. Grace looked at Daisy quizzically. What's the matter with you? You look different. What do you mean? I don't know why people keep asking me that. I'm perfectly normal, Daisy replied, trying to suppress a grin that pulled at the corners of her mouth, despite her best efforts. I can see that, clearly. You're very fine. So fine you're giving Phyllis Winston compliments, Grace commented. Don't think I didn't hear you. You were here for that? I didn't even notice. My second point, Grace replied with a smile. Daisy knew she wasn't fooling Grace. While Marjorie would have been happy to let the matter drop and do her sneaky investigations behind her back, Grace was more direct. Truth be told, Daisy was itching to tell her. What is going on? Grace asked again, as the smile Daisy had tried to suppress broke free. Immediately, Daisy slid into the seat across from her friend. I met someone, she said in a whisper, as she leaned closer to Grace to ensure only she could hear. What? Who? When? Grace asked excitedly. I answered an advert, just like you suggested. Grace's eyes grew wide. As I suggested? Grace questioned. The day you were last here. Don't you remember what you told me? Yes, but I didn't realize it had made such an impact on you. I never dreamed you'd actually do it. Didn't you think I should? Daisy asked, nervously. Grace's words had planted the idea in her head, even if it was Robert's opinion that had finally pushed her into action. No. It's not that. I just thought you had other reasons for being against it, Grace commented, looking around as if searching for someone. That maybe you were interested in someone closer. Closer? Like who? Daisy questioned. She had a suspicion as to exactly whom Grace was referring to, but she wasn't about to mention it. No one, apparently. Must have been my imagination. Must have been, Daisy mused. She was eager to share the news of her new man. Anyway. Tell me all about him, Grace encouraged her. It's all so exciting and mysterious. I don't even know his name, but I find myself thinking about him all the time. That does sound like a thrill. So what do you know of him? He likes to laugh. He's always wanted to be married and have a big family. He was born in Virginia, but moved in order to establish his own legacy. I guess his father was a very important man, and everyone expected him to follow in his footsteps, but he had plans of his own. Sounds like someone I know, Grace mused, giving Daisy a knowing look. Yes, he does sound a bit like me. Leaving home to make his own way. That's what makes it so perfect, we understand each other. We both lost our mamas when we were small. His daddy raised him, and as you know, my aunt and uncle raised me until I left home, so we have so much in common. You told him all that? Grace asked, looking surprised. He really must be special if you shared your past with him. I know how difficult it was for you to tell me. He is special, Daisy replied with a big smile. He has his own business. He says he's getting ready to make some big changes in them, which will make his business the most successful in town, if things come together right. It's good to know he's successful. Where's he from? I don't know. That's the mysterious part. We've been talking for some time now, but we never give personal details. He doesn't know my name or where I live. Everything's handled through this agency, see, and I send my letter to them and they send it to him. Like how it happened with me and Marshall? More or less. Just that me and dear sir don't know who the other is. Dear sir? Grace asked, amused. That's what I call him. He calls me lady, Daisy explained. That's romantic. Go on, Grace urged. Grace, if I could show you his letters I would, but I wouldn't want to bring M round here. Why not? Grace questioned. Robert. He's against the whole mail order bride thing, and then there's Marjorie, of course. Marjorie? Grace replied and then nodded knowingly. She does have a way of spreading things, and I don't mean just butter. Both women laughed. She certainly does. I have one question for you, Daisy, Grace stated seriously. What's that? Are you in love? The question took Daisy by surprise, but the answer didn't linger long in her mouth. Yes. I think I am. Then what are you waiting for? Grace asked gently. Daisy wasn't sure what Grace meant. Marry him, Daisy. Write to him and tell him how you feel and that you want to marry him. I couldn't. How forward would that be? I just couldn't. She gazed at her friend. Could I? What's stopping you? What was stopping her? It had been months. The cafe wasn't improving, and she wasn't getting any younger. So why was she hesitant to take the next step? Daisy? Grace said. Yes? I think Marjorie's ready for you. She's gawking at us through the kitchen door. Oh. All right. I'll talk to you later. Daisy touched her hand to Grace's belly lightly and smiled, before rushing off to deliver the Winstons' breakfast. Chapter 4. What had happened to Daisy? In the past few months, there had been a definite change in her that Robert couldn't pinpoint, but whatever it was good. She was working harder than ever, even though their patrons were few. She had even taken extra shifts to lend a hand. Robert had lost another girl recently and was glad for the extra help. This morning Daisy seemed particularly cheerful. He only wished he could share in whatever it was that was making her happy. He could use something to improve his day. He was tearing himself to pieces between the cafe and the inn. He wasn't sure he'd be able to continue like this. Both business were suffering, and he couldn't afford it much longer. He preferred to take control of the inn, which meant he needed someone to manage the cafe, and there was only one person who came to mind: Daisy. It was true she was a female, and Robert had very clear ideas on having a female in charge, but Daisy had shown real spunk over the past months. And she'd shown a go-get-em spirit that he had to admit helped him at both the cafe and the inn. She was willing to give her all, just like he was. She would make the perfect person to manage the cafe, if not for the fact she was a female. He sat outside behind the cafe next to his best friend, discussing his dilemma. So that's it. Daisy would be the perfect person if she were a man, but she ain't, and I don't know what to do. I need the help. Hire her. Marshall's response was so matter-of-fact that at first Robert wasn't sure he'd heard him correctly. Just like that? Why not? You think she's the perfect person for the position, Marshall continued, giving his friend a calm look. But she ain't a man, Marshall. Neither is my wife, but last time I checked, she was the best thing I've ever done for my ranch, Marshall affirmed. When I'm not there, she handles everything. I don't worry about a thing. Even now that she's in the family way. Even now. She oversees everything when needed. She hasn't been doing a lot of physical work 'cause of the baby and the hard time she's had, but she still makes sure everything's running smoothly. I'd be lost without her. I envy you, Marshall. You found the right woman for you. She's a blessing from God, just like the Bible says. Her children will call her blessed, and her husband will praise her. Robert gave Marshall a big smile. You certainly do praise her. She deserves it. Every bit of it, Marshall said with a grin. But she isn't the only woman. You praise Daisy a lot, too. It's like you said. She deserves it. She works hard. I admire that. Plus, she came all the way out here from Boback, Virginia, all on her own when she was just 16. She's earned everything she's gotten since then. She's made herself, and that's something anyone could respect. I remember when she came. She was nothing but a scrawny little scrap of a girl, but looking at her the other day, she's grown into a fine woman, Marshall commented, as he dusted his hands off on his pants. What did you say? I said Daisy's grown into a fine woman. I'm surprised someone hasn't tried to snatch her away yet. A strange sharp pain pierced Robert's chest. Snatch Daisy away? You all right, Robert? Marshall questioned. Fine. Just fine. You sure? You look a lil' surprised. I guess I am. What's the matter? Nothing, really. It's just what you said. I never thought of Daisy like that, he confessed, giving Marshall a shrug. Why not? She's a woman. She's not a girl, and I know she wants to get married and have children like most women do. One day, someone's gonna come along, catch her fancy, and sweep her off her feet. Marshall chuckled. Then it won't matter how good she is, you'll have to find someone to replace her. Replace her? Robert repeated. When she eventually leaves, Marshall said casually. No man's gonna want his wife running herself ragged between a cafe and a saloon, when she has a family at home. He'll want her by his side. Who knows? He may even want her to move out of town. You never know. Robert's throat was feeling tight. Maybe he needed to get some water, the day was a hot one, after all. Marshall, thanks for the talk. You've been a big help. Think I better get back to work, Robert replied, getting to his feet. Sure thing. You take it easy. Things'll work out. Robert sat at his desk feeling as if the world was perched on his shoulders. The numbers were simply awful, and nothing he was doing was making enough of a difference. The cafe and the inn were going under, and if he didn't do something drastic quickly, they were all going to drown. Including Daisy. He couldn't let her down, not after all she had been through. He had to do whatever he could to save her and his businesses. Robert? Daisy's voice roused him from his thoughts. Daisy, what are you still doing here? We need to talk, she said hesitantly as she took the seat across the table from him. I know. Things aren't getting better. He studied her. What's on your mind? We're in trouble. Yeah, we are, Robert replied, putting down his pen. I've tried everything I know, and nothing's working. She was biting her lip. She only ever bit her lip when she was nervous. Why had she come in to talk to him, anyway? Was she going to run out on him, too? He'd already lost a chef and 2 girls. He couldn't lose Daisy, too. I think we need to be honest with each other, Daisy began. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't working out. We can't keep doing this, running between the inn and the cafe. Something has to give. I'm doing my best, Daisy. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what else I can do. I do. You do? He looked at her curiously. She wasn't meeting his gaze, and she was still biting her lip. I've been thinking, and I've had some ideas for how we can improve things. Things I think would help. He did his best to suppress a smile. Ideas were far better than the imagined news she was leaving. All right. Tell me. Really? She replied, with an excited glint in her eye. Go ahead. First thing, I think we need to redo the menu. People have been getting the same thing since you opened. The food's good and all, but people like something new to spice things up once in a while. I was thinking we could start with the dinner menu. It's the weakest of all the meal times, and I think having something new to offer would encourage people to come. We could put a sign out front to tell people what's new. Keep going. Then we could advertise the space for special occasions at a fee. People are always looking for some place nice to have a party. I got the idea when Marshall and Grace got married. You let them use the place, 'cause they're your friends, but if they thought it was the perfect place for a reception, then others might, too. Robert's expression was intent as he got to his feet and walked around the table toward her. You got more ideas like this? He asked, as he sat on the corner of his desk. Yes, she replied, getting to her feet. And why haven't you ever told me? She looked up at him squarely. Because I know how you feel about women and business. From now on, you forget everything I ever said about women and business, he replied with a big grin. You mean that? I do. I like your ideas. I think they'll work. Thank you. Don't know what I'd do without you, to be sure, he said as a compulsion gripped him. Surprising himself even more than her, he pulled her into a bear hug, which made Daisy giggle. Thank you, Robert, she replied, returning his hug. I guess this means you don't still see me as some little girl. Marshall let her go, realizing that right then, seeing her as a little girl was the last thing on his mind. He hoped she'd never leave. Marshall's words were still in his head. One day he might have to say goodbye to Daisy, but he was thankful it wasn't today. Chapter 5. Daisy was smiling with satisfaction as she greeted their new customers. There weren't many, but they were there. The menu ideas had helped, but more could still be done to get things back to where they used to be. Yet, that wasn't the only reason for her smile. After weeks of silence, she'd received another letter from Dear Sir. His letter was apologetic, but he explained that once things settled with his business, he'd make arrangements for them to meet. It seemed Robert wasn't the only man she knew with a struggling business, but at least Dear Sir was turning things around. It made her want to see things turn around for Robert, too. She couldn't help the man she was growing to love, but she could help the one close by. Perhaps dear Sir could share his practices with her, and she could tell Robert. She'd like to help him turn things completely around, so that when the time was right and dear Sir asked for her hand, everything would be settled for her to leave. The thought filled her with both joy and anxiety. She was eager to start a new chapter in her life again, eager to have the family she'd always wanted, but leaving Robert wasn't going to be easy. He'd been all she'd had for the past 4 years. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to say goodbye to him. "Things are looking better, ain't they?" Robert commented, stepping up behind her. "They are. The new additions to the menu seem to have helped." "They did." "Good idea," he said, patting her lightly on the shoulder. "Maybe I should have asked you for suggestions a long time ago. It don't matter now. Things are only gonna get better from here. You just wait and see." "Think you're gonna be able to handle everything here on your own tonight?" Robert asked. "I could stick round and give you a hand." "What about the inn?" "They need you, too," Daisy replied. "The people at the inn ain't been there for me, not like you. If anyone deserves the help, you do." How was she ever going to leave him when he said things like that? Robert was a good man. She often wondered how it was that he wasn't married yet. He was only 8 years older than she was. He was different from the men in town. He had a way about him that probably came from being from the East, where his family were important people in town, though he never really talked about it. Robert liked to keep things private. She smiled. He still slicked his hair back neatly, and his clothes were always starched and ironed, with his shoes shone like a big city man. Then there was his generosity. Robert had a charitable heart, one that gave and kept on giving, especially to her. When Daisy had arrived in Lawton City, she was a girl with nothing much to offer. She was looking for something, though, anything to build a life on. It was Robert who had taught her about faith and helped build her confidence and her life. And he'd given her a job when she had sorely needed one. "You all right?" he asked, looking down at her. "Just fine," Daisy replied and forced a smile. "Thanks for the offer to help." "I accept." "Good," Robert replied, reaching to her waist and untying her apron. "What are you doing?" "I don't like this checkered thing," he commented with a chuckle, wadding up the apron. "Put on the white one. Suits you better anyway." "Why?" she replied, reaching behind the counter for the white apron. "Ain't innocents always put together with white?" Daisy was speechless. "The things he said. You think I'm innocent, then?" "I know ya are." His eyes met hers with a gentle gaze. Daisy laughed, playing along. "And how would you know that?" "Because I know ya. I know you better than anyone." The sincerity in his dark eyes snatched away her thoughts. She didn't think she'd ever seen that look in his eyes before. I feel the same way. Now I need to get to work," she stated, fastening a quick knot behind her waist and grabbing her notepad and pencil. They had more customers that night than they'd had in months. Robert's presence was a real help. She hadn't anticipated the turnout to be so large, and she wouldn't have been able to handle it alone. With him there, they were able to do fine. Everything was perfect, but something felt different to her. It wasn't overtly obvious, but there was something in the air, some change she couldn't quite figure out. She kept thinking of her mystery man, and then she would look at Robert and find his eyes were on her. Leaving Robert for dear Sir was a hard thing to think about, but the things she wanted weren't to be found waiting tables in a cafe for the rest of her life. Robert had given her so much, but he couldn't give her this. He couldn't give her love and children and a permanent home. Should she tell him she'd found someone and had fallen in love? She frowned. Why would Robert even want to know? She was being silly. Besides, dear Sir hadn't formally asked for her hand yet. It didn't make sense worrying Robert now, when things were still a struggle. Her news would have to wait. Chapter 6. Robert stood outside Grace's and Marshall's home. He knocked lightly, and Grace opened the door. "Hope I'm not intruding," Robert told her. "Never. You're always welcome here." "Come on in," she offered, as she stepped aside. Thanks. I won't stay long. I know you and Daisy must have lots to do around here with Marshall gone, he replied as he stepped inside. Thanks for letting Daisy come up here to help me. I know you must need her at the cafe. She's given up her position at the saloon, too, which pleases me greatly. How are you getting by? I was glad when she quit working at the saloon, too. I never did like her working over there. Things at the inn and cafe are going better these days. Not like before, but better, Robert informed her as he took a seat. That sounds good, Grace commented as she lowered herself into the rocker across from him. Grace was near due, and she was a beautiful sight. Her belly was swollen out beneath her lavender-colored dress, and her face had become rosy as the months had passed. She was moving slower now, rocking a bit from side to side, as most women did when they were that far along. Robert found himself wondering how Marshall could have dared to leave her at such a time. He wasn't sure he could leave his wife when she was so far along. What was he thinking about? He didn't have a wife. Yet. He shook it off, and instead set his eyes to looking about the room. He didn't want other ears to overhear what he'd come to speak, especially Daisy. She'd think him foolish if she knew. Robert had been keeping a secret for months, and now he needed someone to talk to, and the only person he felt who qualified in Marshall's absence was Grace. Where's Daisy? She's up in her room writing a letter, Grace informed him. She was rubbing her belly gently as she rocked. She'll be a while. That girl always has a lot to say. She gave him a curious grin which Robert found interesting, but didn't ask about. You all right? He asked, watching her carefully. I'm fine. The baby's just a little energetic today. It hardly lets me sleep these days. How are you handling it? I'm doing fine, really. Just eager now. It's almost time, and I don't know what to expect. I just want Marshall to be here with me. He'll be back soon, and in the meantime, you've got Daisy to hold your hand if you need it. Yes, that's true. Having her here is a blessing for sure. I know you must miss her at the cafe. Daisy's been doing great at the cafe. I decided to give her a raise, and I think that's why she quit the saloon. She never really liked working there. I only wish I could have given her a raise sooner. Daisy's devoted to the cafe and to you. Her words caught him by surprise. She ain't devoted to me. She's thankful for me. I helped her when she needed it, that's all. I don't think so. You care about her, and she cares about you. That's why you're such a good team. He shifted in his chair. You're right, we are, which is what makes this so difficult, he replied after a moment of consideration. What's going on, Robert? He took a deep breath. He hadn't shared what he was about to say with anyone, and for some reason, it was difficult to utter now that the time had come. I want to get married. That's wonderful. Who's the lucky woman? Daisy hasn't said a word to me about it. That's because she don't know about it. I haven't told her anything yet. Why not? She'd be happy for you. All Daisy cares about is the cafe and you. Grace's tone reflected her interest. I just haven't had the chance to tell her. Not sure if I'm doing the right thing now, with things at the cafe and in being up in the air. He looked at Grace, who was looking at him sympathetically. Go on. I haven't told her, because I haven't asked the lady yet. I'm just not sure the timing's right. I don't know if I've got things together enough to support a wife and eventually a family. I don't want to get into something so important and fail at it. You don't get into marriage and fail, Robert. You work on it, together. What do you mean? I mean, everything isn't up to you alone anymore. A wife is a helpmeet. Her role is to help you be the man you're supposed to be. When Robert and I first got together, we had to learn about each other, our strengths and weaknesses, and learn to trust one another. He was struggling with the ranch, as you know, and he needed someone there who could understand him. God let me be that person, and I'm sure this woman you're thinking of marrying will be the same to you. You just need to give her a chance. Grace took a deep breath, appearing winded from her speech. She gave him a sheepish, almost apologetic grin. Is that the way it really is? I'm sure of it. If this woman has Robert Ferguson thinking of marriage, when I've never heard a word about such a desire from you before, then she has to be some special lady. He returned her grin. She is. He felt as if a load had been removed from his shoulders. Perhaps, he'd already known the answer all along but just needed the assurance from a woman that he was doing the right thing. After all, Grace had taken a huge leap in faith to come all the way to Lawton City to marry Marshall. Whether the woman was near or far, the choice to marry was always going to be a leap. Do you think I should tell Daisy? I think you should, but maybe after the lady has agreed to your proposal, Grace suggested. You're right, Robert chuckled, rising to his feet. Thank you, Grace. I needed the talk. Anytime. You're more than welcome. Don't tell Daisy I stopped by, all right? I don't want her to know what we were talking about. Grace nodded. I won't say a word. You take care now. I'll see myself out. Robert felt light-hearted as he took his leave. His mind was made up. As soon as things improved a bit more, he'd make his move and ask his lady to marry him. It would be perfect. He'd ask her to help him with the inn, and he'd still have Daisy there to help with the cafe. He blanched at the thought of telling Daisy. Why did it bother him so? Like Grace said, surely, she'd be happy for him. But something in his spirit was disquieted. He shook his head at himself. Everything was turning around. Why in the world was he borrowing trouble with such worries? Soon things would be as they should, and everyone would be happy. That's what he wanted, a happy, peaceful life for everyone he cared about. Chapter 7. Who is this guy? Robert asked, agitated. His name's Jackson Smith, and he's some big businessman from the East. Owns a string of inns out there, and when he came out to First Pike last year, he decided the place was perfect for another one. It opened its doors earlier this year. That's why your business has slipped. People have been heading over there to stay when they're in the area. Marshall paused and sighed before continuing. He's got big names backing him, and he's well known back east. People already know about his inn even before they get to the area. He's getting your customers long before they even leave home. This wasn't good. Robert counted on people coming into town and looking for somewhere to stay. If this man, Jackson, was already soliciting the business before they even started their journey, he was in trouble. And that ain't all. What are you talking about? Marshall's gaze fell. I met him for business. He wants a large order of beef for his inn in First Pike, but he also said he's looking to start an inn here. In Lawton City? But I have an inn here. He knows, Marshall stated, meeting his eyes. He told me he's planning on running you into the ground. He thinks you're small time, and when he brings his inn here, with his suppliers from back east, you won't stand a chance. Why was this happening now? Just when Robert had made up his mind on things, and now this? If this man was really threatening to run his business out of town, then it definitely wasn't the time to start thinking about marriage. And Daisy wouldn't be ready to handle a threat like this. Yes, she had good ideas, but this man was a savvy businessman, who probably had people hired to come up with ideas. Daisy had no formal education to compare to what those people would have. Neither did he. How could they fight something like that? Thanks for letting me know, Marshall. Least I could do. You know I'll help however I can. If you want, I won't do business with him. No. You gotta do it. You need your profits, too. This isn't about our friendship, this is business, and if he's gonna be good for you, then I'd be selfish to ask you not to. Especially with Grace so close to having the baby. What are you gonna do? I don't know. He frowned. Lord, is this ever going to end? I know what you mean. I was in that place once when my business was under threat. What did you do? Robert asked, eager for any help he could get. Prayed and did the best I could. He rested an assuring hand on Robert's shoulder. There ain't much else we can do. We don't control this world, but there is someone who does. You just got to pray. I know that, I just didn't think of asking him. That's right. Marshall nodded. That's always the way. We think we can do it all on our own, until he lets us see we can't do it without him. Right now, you're in that place. I understand, I've been there myself. Robert nodded. Marshall was right. He had been trying to do this on his own. He hadn't once gone to God about it, even though he knew better. The good Lord had brought him through so much already, even when he took over the business in the first place. Why hadn't it occurred to him to take this to him? I'll see you later, Marshall, Robert said, patting his friend on the shoulder as he walked away. What are you gonna do? Exactly what you said. Daisy was a breath of fresh air. The minute she'd walked into the office with the news that their changes to the lunch menu were going over as well as the dinner menu, Robert was encouraged. Jackson Smith may have felt they were small time, but the people of this town knew him, and now that he'd made some changes, they were supporting him once again. He may not know it, but Mr. Smith had a fight on his hands, and Robert wasn't fighting alone. He'd taken the matter to God and placed it in his hands. He was sure God would deal with it, all he had to do was keep doing what he was doing. God would give the increase. Daisy's news was a confirmation of that. Oh, and there's someone here to see you. Who? I wasn't expecting anyone. Not sure. He didn't give his name, she told him, but he's real charming. You should have seen how the ladies turned their heads when he walked in, fancy suit and all. Fancy suit, you said? Robert questioned. Daisy might not have known who the man was, but he was pretty sure he did, and if he was right, he wasn't about to keep him waiting. Robert walked into the cafe with Daisy. He sat down across from the other man and studied him. The man seemed very calm considering the fact that he'd just walked into his competition's establishment. Robert Ferguson, I presume, the man stated. Jackson Smith, I presume. You'd be right, Jackson replied with a smile, and turned his attention to Daisy, who was still standing nearby to take their order. And who might you be, young lady? Jackson asked, a wide grin plastered on his face. Robert wanted to wipe it off with his fists. Daisy Johnson. A pretty name for a pretty girl, Jackson continued, his attention still on Daisy as she began to take his order. Robert didn't want anything, he was too busy watching the man before him. He didn't appreciate the way he was looking at Daisy. He didn't like it at all. His eyes were following her every move, and he was smiling just a mite too big at her. Daisy wasn't used to such attentions, and the poor girl was practically scarlet from his flattery. Her complexion was giving her hair competition for which was more striking. The two men sat in silence staring at one another coolly, until Daisy returned with Jackson's order. Robert watched as the other man began to eat, but by that time, he'd had enough. What do you want? Robert asked without formality. I assume you ain't here just to taste my food. I wanted to see what I was up against. It's as I expected, Jackson commented with a smarmy grin. Meaning? Robert countered coldly. Taking over in this town will be easy. You have nothing that gives you an advantage. His eyes caught Daisy once more. Well, maybe not nothing. Robert's hand balled into a fist, and he forced himself to his feet before his temper got the best of him. I suggest you enjoy your meal, and then get the blazes out of my establishment. Jackson smirked as he wiped his face. No need to get riled up, Ferguson. I'm going, he continued, dropping his napkin in his plate as he stood to face Robert. I'll be seeing you. Looking forward to it, Robert replied, his fists still balled at his sides. He watched Jackson leave, his eyes never leaving him until he was out the door. Who was that? Daisy asked from behind his shoulder. Trouble. Chapter 8. Jackson Smith announced his intentions to open a new, more modern and fashionable inn in Lawton City, and the people buzzed with the news. By the time he had notices all over town announcing the opening of his inn and cafe, and was offering specials to locals as his gift to them, Daisy and Robert were seriously worried. Jackson was brilliant. His ideas were some Daisy herself had considered but never had the courage to share with Robert. Still, she and Robert had an advantage. Jackson Smith didn't know the people of Lawton City, but they did. Robert had filled Daisy in on everything that the charming man from back east had planned. She was more than a little annoyed with herself for having been taken in by him at their first meeting. He was handsome and suave, to be sure, but he was too slick. She should have known he was going to be trouble, just like Robert had said. Construction had long since started on the inn, just around the time Grace gave birth to a fat baby boy they named Elijah. Daisy had already gone to see him several times and was completely smitten with the little one. She'd stand up with Marshall and Grace once they were ready to get the baby baptized, but that was weeks away yet. Grace was still recovering from the delivery, and little Elijah was continually making his presence known with his strong set of lungs. "You think our place here is gonna last?" Marjorie asked. She was standing near her cooking station, but there was nothing to prepare. There hadn't been more than a few customers all day. Even the Winstons had disappeared on them. It seemed Phyllis wanted to keep up with her more well-to-do friends, who were all flocking to be the first to visit the new inn. Phyllis evidently no longer needed to patronize their cafe, and poor John didn't have much choice in it, or so he said. He'd been very apologetic when he'd come in a few days before to explain their absence. Daisy couldn't blame them, everyone was talking about the new place. "Of course, our cafe will last," Daisy countered, alarmed. "This place has been in Lawton City since the town was founded. It ain't going nowhere." "How can you be sure?" "We ain't had more than a pocketful of customers all day." "You'd be a fool not to notice that," Marjorie said. "I noticed, but it doesn't mean anything. I'm sure this place faced lots of hard times before. This is just Robert's first time having to deal with them. I assure you he isn't taking things lying down. He has a plan." "I sure hope so. I'd hate to see this place close down. I've been coming here since I was a girl, and when Robert started looking for a new cook, I was eager for the job. I'd always wanted to work here. My great-grandmama was the first cook, did you know that?" "I had no idea. Why'd you never say anything before?" "It wasn't a big deal." Marjorie looked around the kitchen, her eyes eventually coming back to Daisy. "There's a lot of memories in this old place. Everyone in town must be connected to it in some way." She was right, which gave Daisy an idea. She ran around the counter and gave Marjorie a big hug. "Marjorie, you're brilliant," she exclaimed, taking the other woman completely off guard. "What are you talking about?" "You'll see," Daisy announced as she quickly untied her apron. She slapped it onto the empty counter. "Could you watch the cafe for me for a few minutes? I need to talk to Robert over at the inn." "Shouldn't be too hard," Marjorie replied sarcastically. Daisy raced toward the inn, her skirts hitched up in her hand and her red hair flying about her. A few minutes later, she burst into the inn and raced for the manager's office. "Robert," she exclaimed as she pushed the door open. He was hunched over his desk, his hands on his temples. He looked up at her with dark circles under his eyes. He clearly hadn't been sleeping. "What's all the ruckus, Daisy?" "I have it," she said, panting. "Have what?" "I have the perfect way to save the inn and the cafe." "What are you talking about?" "Everyone in town is invested in your business, whether they realize it or not. All of their relatives were involved in the construction and running of this place in some way," she continued, still trying to catch her breath. "So what?" "So we need to remind them about that fact. We need to remind them that the Lawton City Inn and Cafe isn't just your business, it's part of this town's legacy, a part of us all." "All right. But I don't see." "I do. Trust me," she interrupted him. Robert had to agree to her plan. It was the perfect way to keep the business afloat, the one thing that Jackson Smith couldn't do anything about, the loyalty of the people of Lawton to their history. Yes, they may want the new and modern, but in their hearts, they still carried their past, their beginnings. Robert folded his hands on the desk in front of him. Daisy watched him silently, and when his eyes opened his response was precisely what she wanted to hear. "Do what you think is best. I'm leaving it in your hands, Daisy." Her heart stirred, and she stood there, grinning at him. You won't regret this, Robert. He gave her a warm smile. I know. Chapter 9. The whole town turned out for Daisy's event, and as Robert welcomed their friends and neighbors, he felt a flood of relief and joy well up inside him. God had answered his prayers in the form of Daisy's wonderful idea to celebrate the people's loyalty with a party. Daisy looked lovely that evening. She'd had a dark green dress made for the occasion, and had even gotten her hair done by Deborah, all swept up in a complicated bun. Robert marveled at how grown-up she looked, like a real lady. Welcome, she said with a smile as John and Phyllis Winston walked in, accompanied by a number of their acquaintances. Their friends were people who had never come into the cafe, but they had connections here. Daisy had reminded everyone of this with the notices she'd posted all over town. These people's families had been part of the group who had founded Lawton City, and when everyone else had jumped on board to support their history, the Winstons had been quick to follow. Daisy's plan was working. Jackson Smith was using the best he could find from outside, but the businessmen of Lawton City were a proud bunch, and when Daisy informed them that she wanted to collaborate on an effort that would not only enhance business for the inn and cafe, but their businesses, too, they'd all quickly become involved. Jackson's construction was affecting business at their establishments as well, and instead of fighting it on their own, it made sense to partner together against their common challenge. There weren't only townspeople in attendance, however, but others had come to join the event, including a few from First Pike, those who had started out in Lawton City and whose families were a part of the town's foundation. Please come in and enjoy yourselves. Daisy continued her greetings as people continued to file in. Robert stood on the other side of the door doing the same, and every once in a while, he'd give Daisy a smile, and she'd return it. Once all the guests seemed to have arrived, Daisy moved into place near the rear of the cafe to make her presentation. Looks like tonight's gonna be a huge success, Marshall commented, sidling up beside Robert. Certainly does, Robert replied. And it's all thanks to her. His eyes fixed on Daisy, who had already launched into her presentation for the remodeling of the cafe and inn. It was brilliant. It was to be a collaborative effort between business owners to support one another, and invest in the inn and cafe with the promise of future returns on their investment. In the interim, they would promise to patronize each other as their suppliers and thereby give the other businesses incentives to ensure the inn and cafe were successful. What did I tell ya? Marshall commented. He was also watching Daisy, who seemed to be in her element. I should have let her take charge long ago, but my foolish pride held me back. I tell you, Marshall, when she came to me with this idea, and I prayed about it, I felt a peace come over me. I just knew it would work out if I let her run with it. The peace of the Lord, Marshall answered, folding his arms over his chest in appreciation of everything he was hearing. She's really something, ain't she? I'm really glad to see her so happy. Why? Grace mentioned something about her being worried. About what? Robert questioned, still focused on Daisy. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but it seems Daisy's found herself a beau. Robert's heart lurched as his eyes flew to Marshall's face. A beau? She never said nothin' to me about that. From what I hear, she ain't the only one keeping her love life a secret, Marshall countered, giving Robert a knowing look. Grace told ya, huh? My wife and I don't keep nothin' from each other. Robert's gaze faltered, but he quickly regained his focus as he thought of Daisy with another man. Some man he didn't know and hadn't approved of. What if it was someone like Jackson Smith? His protective nature zoomed into overdrive. Who is this fella? He questioned seriously. Grace said he's some man she met through a classified. Robert's eyes grew large. She's going to be a mail-order bride? Seems so. They started writing months ago, and it seems Daisy's fallen hard for him. The man's been having problems with his business and hasn't been too consistent with his replies. A week or so ago, just about the time you two started working on this, he wrote her and told her he wanted to meet her once things with his business settled. Marshall smiled, and looked at Robert. Grace told me this week Daisy received another letter. She never had time to go into details about it. But it looks like your little Miss Daisy is gonna be making herself someone's missus. Appears like that day I was talking about is coming sooner than I thought. You ready for it? Robert couldn't speak. His ears were hearing Marshall's words, but they were making no sense. His gaze turned to Daisy, and suddenly the little girl he'd seen for all those years disappeared. Little Daisy was gone, and a grown woman was standing in her place, a beautiful grown woman. Still, it couldn't be true, could it? And then, his breath stopped. Everything Marshall was saying couldn't have been a coincidence. The timeline he relayed was too precise, even the timing of the letters he mentioned, perfectly aligned with the letters he'd written to his lady. How had he missed it? Now that he thought about it, the tone of the letters sounded just like Daisy. He gasped. Daisy was his lady. Chapter 10. The event had been an incredible success. Daisy was having trouble grasping all that had happened. Her heart was still racing, and she could hardly get her hands to keep still as she began writing down the list of promissory notes she'd been given. And then there was the biggest surprise of them all. If anyone had told her this was how things would have turned out, she wouldn't have believed them. Things like this just didn't happen every day. It was a bona fide miracle. The gentleman approached her almost immediately after the presentation had been made. His was a face she didn't recognize, and she believed he was one of the guests who had come over from First Pike. She had been right. It turned out he was the owner of the bank in First Pike, but his roots were in Lawton City. His great-grandfather had also been in money lending, and he had been the man who had first financed the building of the cafe and inn. When the gentleman informed Daisy of this, she'd immediately brought him to meet Robert, and the two had begun a lengthy conversation. The gentleman, R.F. Benstrom, was very impressed with the presentation and commended Robert on having Daisy make it on his behalf. He called it sheer genius to have a pretty lady make the presentation, making it that much more appealing to those listening. Daisy had expected Robert to take the credit. It didn't matter to her as long as the business was saved, but to her surprise, he informed Mr. Benstrom that everything had been her idea. She couldn't believe it, and neither could Mr. Benstrom. The two men talked for a long while, even after the rest of the party had left. That was when R.F. Benstrom had made his proposal. He offered to fully fund the refurbishment of the inn and cafe at no interest. It turned out that his father had always counted his part in the creation of the business as one of the best things he ever did, his way of giving back in a tangible way. R.F. wanted to see his great-grandfather's mark remain. He didn't even want anything out of it. When Daisy heard, she felt as if she could faint, and Robert was left absolutely speechless. The shock in his face was something she'd never forget. Even now as she was making her notes, the memory of it made her smile. "Still at work?" Robert questioned, as he peered through the door. "Just finishing up," she replied brightly. "I still can't believe all that happened today." "Neither can I," he replied, stepping into the room. "Seems like a dream come true for everyone." "Sure does," Daisy commented, setting her pen aside. She slipped her book into the drawer. She'd deal with the rest of it tomorrow, but she was done for the night. She rose from her seat and walked toward Robert. He still looked dazed, and he was staring at her. "I think it's time I should head home." "Are you leavin'?" she questioned, looking up at him. "Not yet," he replied quietly with a shake of his head. "All right, you have a good night," she replied as she moved past him. Daisy had only taken 2 steps before Robert's hand caught her arm. He turned her around, and his dark eyes settled on her face. Her stomach fluttered. "What's the matter, Robert?" "Nothin' at all," he replied, letting go of her hand. "I just wasn't ready for you to go yet." Daisy laughed. "All you had to do was ask me to stay." "Was that all I had to do?" His question made no sense, but after all that had transpired that day, they were both a bit muddled and excited. "Of course. You can ask me anything." "Promise?" Yuri being strange, she replied with a light laugh. "Is something on your mind? Why didn't you tell me you'd met someone?" Daisy's breath caught in her throat. How did he know? Grace wouldn't have told him, would she? No, she wouldn't have. Then how? How did? Marshall told me tonight. He said you'd told Grace about some man you'd met in the adverts for a mail-order bride. Her eyes fell, and Daisy could feel the heat building in her cheeks as she turned her back to him. That's true. I know how you feel about all that, so I thought it best not to say nothin'. So you're gonna be leaving soon then? He asked, his voice low. I don't know for sure, Daisy admitted. He hasn't asked me to marry him yet. His last letter just said that things were improving. And very soon, I'll be able to send for you. Be patient, our time is coming. Daisy's stomach fell through her feet. She turned slowly to face him. You read my letter, she accused him, baffled as to how he could possibly have found it. He stepped closer. I wrote it. Her brow furrowed. That didn't make sense. If Robert had written it, then that meant he was dear sir. Her eyes grew large. She shook her head. No, it can't be. Your first letter said that you love adventure, and that you were ready to take another, he commented, and Daisy's knees grew weak. It was you all this time? He nodded. Did you know it was me? I had no idea until tonight when Marshall talked to me about what he'd learned from Grace. I put the pieces together myself. What does this mean? She questioned, her voice small. It means I have something to say, Robert answered, stepping closer and closing his hands gently around her arms. Daisy couldn't move. She could hardly process what was going on. How had all this come to be in one night? Had God decided to pour out every blessing in the heavens? Daisy, I've been a fool, Robert started. A real fool. You're not a fool, she countered. I am. I thought I had everything under control, but it's like what Marshall said, God allows us to see just how much we need him. It's been months since I thought of handing the cafe over to you. I was sure you were perfect for the job, but I let the fact that you were a woman stop me from acting. The day you came with your idea, God let me know you were just what this place needed, and look what happened. She kept silent and let him continue, her mind reeling. Then to top it all off, he let me know you were the one I'd fallen for all along. Daisy's heart quickened. Fallen for? Yes, fallen for, he reiterated, pulling her close. She went willingly, their gazes fixed on one another as he continued. I'm in love with ya, Daisy. I think I have been for a long time, I was just too blind to see it. I kept seeing the girl I first hired, ignoring the woman she'd become, he admitted. Do you see her now? Yes, I see her. What I want to know is, does she see me? She stared at him. Do you see me as the man who hired you to work for him? Or do you see me as something more? Now that you know the truth, can you love the man in front of you, or are those feelings just for the man in those letters? Daisy couldn't decipher what she was feeling. Everything swirled in her mind. She'd never dreamed the man she'd been writing to could be Robert, but now it seemed clear as day that it was. How had she missed it? Was she so sure her future lay somewhere beyond her grasp, that she hadn't seen what was right in front of her? But where did that leave them? She faltered for words that would express how she felt. I fell for everything the man in those letters represented. He was strong, kind, wise and determined. Everything you've always been. She chuckled, low in her throat. Now that I think of it, I believe that's why I liked him so much. He reminded me of you. Do you still want all you said in those letters? To get married? To have a family of your own? I do. Then there is just one more thing to say, Robert replied, as he dropped to one knee. Will you marry me? Daisy could hardly hear him, her heart was beating so hard it was the only sound she could make out. She began to tremble with the wonder of it all. Yes, she cried. Yes, I'll marry ya. Robert sprang to his feet immediately, drawing her into his arms as his lips touched hers in a kiss. I love ya, he proclaimed when they finally parted. I love ya, too, Daisy affirmed with a laugh. Seems like we're gonna have a lot more to announce in the morning, Robert declared. We have to tell Marshall and Grace. They have to be the first to know. Fine, we'll go there first thing in the morning, but right now, I better take you home. Just one more minute, Daisy responded, taking his face in her hands and pulling him to her. I'm gonna love ya for the rest of my life. We're gonna love each other, he proclaimed, as his lips met hers. God's ways were indeed miraculous, Daisy thought as she embraced her fiancé. She snuggled her head beneath Robert's chin and sighed with contentment. Her new chapter in life had just begun. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.